So my name is Ben Zellers. I'm with the City of Madison Planning Division, joined by several colleagues around the room. Urvashi Martin, Linda Horvath, Brianna Collins, I think stepped out to steer some people into the room. Colin Puntz in the back. Sarah Grimalkin from our Parks Division is here as well, and she'll be speaking to Parks midway through the presentation. And then also Alder Bill Tischler is doing some camera work this evening.
Oh.
So,
I have two jobs.
So we'll go ahead and dive right in. Thank you for coming this evening through the bad weather. I'm kind of starting to be convinced that if we schedule a meeting like this, it starts to snow, so I'm glad you all could make it. Already introduced the project team here. So just a quick agenda for the evening. We'll be talking about area plans, this one being the West Area Plan, and kind of how that fits into a new framework that we're using really throughout the city, starting with this effort and then an accompanying effort on the northeast side of the city. I'll talk specifically about the West Area Plan, its boundary and demographics, some trends and issues, some of the plan focused topics as far as land use and transportation, neighborhoods and housing, and parks and stormwater. I'll touch on the planning process and the timeline. And then we'll take some general questions at the end of the presentation and then break out into probably two smaller discussion groups. One of which will be a little bit more focused on parks since we have Sarah here to hear those comments and facilitate that feedback. So the planning framework really splits the city into 12 specific areas. This is for a few different reasons. We really wanted to make sure we were covering all areas of the city as we do these area plans. In previous planning efforts, sometimes we'd end up with portions of the city that would get 2, 3, sometimes even 4 overlapping plans, whereas other areas of the city had no coverage with these area plans whatsoever. So this is a little bit of a more methodical approach to make sure we're getting coverage and providing the details for all areas of the city. And we also will be going through and refreshing these on a regular basis, updating them on a regular basis, trying to do a 10-year rotation. So we will hopefully be revisiting this area in 2033, which sounds like a long ways off, but we'll probably be there before we know it. So like I said, the West area is one of the two initial planning efforts that we're getting underway. There is, if someone is interested in citywide issues, an accompanying effort on the northeast side. They, like this effort, have a project website and are doing some similar engagement for that portion of the city. So these area plans will do a number of different things. As I mentioned, cover the entire city, be established and updated each decade. And we're really trying to emphasize on reaching out to residents in communities that are typically underrepresented in a planning process. And so we're doing that through a few different methods. Really the main effort for that is through community connectors, and we're doing some additional facilitation by hiring some groups and folks within the community to make connections with underrepresented groups. Through our first kind of 2 virtual meetings that we held, we saw that we were kind of heavily tilted towards homeowners and had a fairly high ratio of retirees through those. So we know that this area is pretty diverse in terms of also having some really concentrations of renters, as well as kind of racially and ethnically diverse as well. And we also, through these planning efforts, want to have increased coordination with city initiatives. A big slice of that is through Parks Development Planning. The Parks Division is looking at the parks neighborhood and mini parks. I want to make sure I get the phrasing right. Within the West area and also the Northeast area as we go through these processes, and then we'll continue to really partner with the Planning Division in future efforts as well. And then I also want to make sure and mention that the library, Madison Public Library, is doing a strategic plan for the whole west side of Madison, so obviously that overlaps with this planning area. We have some links for that on the project website that folks will be able to check out if you're interested in the library component of the west area of the city. And then again, as I mentioned, really want to reduce the number of outdated and overlapping sub-area plans. And that might be kind of a transition where there may be some overlapping plans, some overlapping neighborhood plans for smaller geographies within this boundary that continue to exist for a little while after this plan is adopted, but eventually those will be fully absorbed up into these area planning efforts. So go ahead and do poll question number 1. I'll turn it over to Urvashi to get that rolling, and you'll be able to use your clickers for that when we give the go-ahead. So it looks like most folks are residents, with one person being working for a community organization, and then just one person interested in weighing in on issues in the area. So, close that out. So just kind of continuing on to talk about area plans a little bit and what they will be covering. These area plans will guide physical changes, and this is at a little bit higher level of detail than the city's comprehensive plan, which is another planning document that I'll touch on a little bit. But area plans will really focus on guiding physical changes within this planning boundary, looking at land use and growth and redevelopment, transportation as far as roads, pedestrians, bicycle network, and transit to some extent, parks and open space as well, and then things like stormwater management, utilities, and public facilities. And then sometimes we get very detailed comments, and we certainly welcome those as part of this effort, but not all of those may make it into the plans. Some of those may be passed along to relevant city departments that immediately, rather than being included in the plan document, because we're kind of taking that mid-level of detail, more detail in the comprehensive plan, but not necessarily at the level of detail of striping a crosswalk right here, or planting a tree right over here. So there are some of those more detailed things, again, that we're happy to take, but may end up passing along rather than integrating into the plan. So we're really not starting from scratch. We are using the 2018 comprehensive plan as really a framework and a guide for this effort. So we'll be proceeding under that existing guidance from the comprehensive plan as far as overarching goals and strategies for the city. Bus rapid transit, or BRT, was also recently adopted by the city, and that's a faster, more frequent level of service that does run through this planning area. Runs along Mineral Point Road, turns onto Whitney Way, and then continues on through Sheboygan down to University Avenue, through the campus in downtown out to Easttown. There's also a recently adopted Metro Network redesign, which you may have heard if you use the bus. Complete Green Streets is another city effort that provides a framework for constructing or reconstructing the city's streets, where we really look to prioritize pedestrians and bicyclists while still accommodating vehicles in most instances. There are some underlying adopted plans that we will be referring to and reviewing as part of this planning process. Watershed studies are something that the engineering division has been undertaking, really starting on the west side, and most of those are finished. That looks at stormwater management and was really an in-depth response to the 2018 kind of monsoons that we experienced in the Madison area. We also have other city reports like impediments to fair housing that have recommendations for topic-specific areas like housing, and some other things that we'll be looking at as well. Having said all that, the feedback that we received from you, that we've received from the virtual meetings, and that we'll be really gathering throughout this effort will help us develop this plan and inform various city initiatives. So just looking a little bit more in depth at the comprehensive plan and giving some example guiding strategies that are within there that we'll be referring to as we go through this planning effort. Some of those are to concentrate the highest intensity development of the city along transit corridors, downtown, and at activity centers. So an activity center might be something like West Town Mall, or kind of the former Westgate area over along Whitney Way. Have compact growth to reduce the development of farmland on the edge of the city, and that can be accomplished through infill and redevelopment like has been happening on the former Westgate property on Whitney Way. To to expand and improve the city's pedestrian and bicycle networks. That can be new bike paths and connections, can be new lanes on city roads, can be adding sidewalks through street reconstruction projects as those occur. Develop complete neighborhoods throughout the city, and that's kind of a goal to bring more goods and services into closer proximity to neighborhoods and the people that use those goods and services. And then support development of a wider mix of housing types, sizes, and costs. So we know certainly that housing, and certainly affordable housing, has been a kind of struggle to develop enough of that really throughout the city. And so looking at providing more of that in more different places, especially in close proximity to transit. So really looking, zooming in on this west area, you can see the boundary outlined in the maps in the back and the board over there as well, but just showing it on the screen here. This is about 5,600 acres, so a pretty sizable area containing about 30,000 residents, which is roughly the size of the city of Fitchburg in terms of population. About 15,200 housing units, about 27.5% people of color in terms of the residents of the area, and contains about 25,000 jobs, so certainly a very big employment center, especially with all the businesses and employment that are in University Research Park, at Hilldale Mall, at West Town Mall, and the surrounding areas. So we'll talk through poll question number 2, so we can get that started, and I can read that off for folks. So we had to kind of boil this down and aggregate these categories since we only have 5 choices in these clickers. We had a few more choices in our virtual meetings, but the question is, what neighborhood and community association is your home in? So most folks actually in association in the planning area that is other than what we showed, followed by the Wexford Village, Walnut Grove, D, and then some folks that don't live in association or don't know or outside the planning area. So I wanted to touch on existing underlying area plans that are in this west area boundary. So there are 5 main ones. Most recently adopted one is the O'Dam Area Plan, which was adopted in 2021, kind of shown in that blue shading. And then there's also Midvale Heights, Westmoreland, University Hill Farms, and Spring Harbor. So actually only showing 4 of them. And so, as I mentioned before, we're going to be reviewing these other plans for strategies, elements, recommendations that are applicable to this West Area Plan in terms of the level of detail and are consistent with more recently adopted cities' policies and priorities. And depending on that review, it's possible that 1 or 2 of these may be retired. It's possible that none of them are retired, and some strategies get aggregated up into the West Area Plan. But that's a review that we're going to be undertaking and as part of this process, and doing some additional analysis on as we dig into those previously adopted plans.
Good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Urvashi Martin. So as you all probably know, that the city is experiencing a lot of growth, and it has been growing pretty steadily for the last several decades, and we are expecting to continue to grow into the future, and anticipating that by 2050 we'll add another additional 100,000 plus new residents in the city. So we have to really be very proactive and plan for this future growth. So this planning process will be focusing on certain topic areas that Ben mentioned in the beginning, that we'll be looking at certain specific topic areas, and one of them is land use and transportation. Under land use, as Ben mentioned, we'll be using our comprehensive plan as kind of our guiding policy to kind of provide us with the guidance on how future growth can be accommodated. And so one of our guidance from the comprehensive plan is that concentrating more high-intensity infill development along transit corridors and also downtown and activity centers, And also the plan recommends to have more compact growth so there's less encroachment and impact on our farmlands. So here's a map that's showing the infill and greenfield developments that have occurred in the city from 2006 to 2021. So there's a lot of infill development that has occurred in the city, and some examples are in the West Planning area, the Hilldale Mall area, the Hill Farms State Office Building site, and also Westgate Mall area. So there are already some redevelopment and infill that's already occurring in this West Planning area. But we'll also, as part of this planning process, look at what other areas are within the planning area where there's opportunities for redevelopment and also accommodating future growth.
Could you explain what the purple is versus the green, please? I can't see it from here.
The purple is showing the infill developments in the city, and the green is showing the greenfield developments, which mostly along the edge of the peripheral areas of the city.
In greenfield being development of farmland, essentially, with homes.
For transportation, we'll be looking at some of the transit improvements that the city is working on. So as you all probably know, that the city's transit network was completely redesigned, and that service will start in the summer of this year in June 2023. In addition to that, bus rapid transit is being implemented. Construction for bus rapid transit has already started, and the service will be operational from September of 2024. So we'll be looking at some of these transit improvements that the city is working on as a guide for our land use and transportation recommendations. In addition to that, there are a couple of other policies that the city recently adopted. The Complete Green Streets Guide and the Vision Zero Plan. Complete Green Streets Guide, as Ben mentioned, it's kind of a framework of how streets can be designed, and we're kind of moving away from designing the streets just for vehicles, but also prioritizing other users of the transportation system, like the pedestrians, bicyclists, transit users, and also prioritizing tree canopy. Vision Zero Plan, which was also recently adopted, that's more of a data-driven strategy that intends to make our streets, bikeways, sidewalks safer to eliminate traffic fatalities and injuries and make these transportation thoroughfares more safer. So we'll be looking at these policy documents, and we'll be using that to guide our transportation recommendations in the plan. So now we'll go ahead and launch our third poll question, which is, how do you commute to work? Go ahead and close the poll. So looks like 50% of our attendees here work from home most or all of the time. 21% are retired or currently not employed. 29% drive or most or all of the time. So another topic area that we'll be focusing on in this planning process is neighborhoods and housing. So we talked about the population growth that the city is experiencing, and with that growth can put some strain on our housing stock. If the city can't keep up with adding new housing to meet the housing demand, that can result in some affordability challenges and also issues like gentrification and displacement. So some of the efforts that the city is currently making in addressing some of those housing affordability challenges, the big one being Affordable Housing Fund, that the city, since that program was created, has added several affordable housing units in certain geographically targeted areas, and the map here is showing the areas that are prioritized for adding new affordable housing, and these are primarily along the bus rapid transit corridor and other high frequency transit corridor. There's also a land banking program that was created to support affordable housing. There's tax increment financing, which has also been used to support affordable housing. There's a down payment assistance program available for homeowners. There's rehabilitation loans. There's also a property tax assistance program that's available for seniors. And then there's an accessory dwelling unit loan financing program that was created to provide support with financing accessory dwelling units that can be a challenge to get financing. That program for the time being has been closed until additional funding is available. So these are some of the efforts that the city is currently making in addressing some of those housing affordability challenges. So now we'll go ahead and launch our next poll question, which is what type of home do you live in? 47% of attendees here live in a single-family home, 27% in a duplex or townhome, and 27% in a multifamily apartment or condominium. We'll go ahead and launch our next poll question, which is, do you rent or own your place of residence? So majority of our attendees here, 92%, own their place of residence. So the next focus area, next topic area that we'll be focusing on in this planning process is green and resilient. And for this section of the presentation, I'll turn it over to Sarah to talk about how the parks planning process will interface with our West Area planning process there.
Perfect, thank you. Hi everybody, I'm Sarah Grimalkin from Parks. Thanks for being here tonight. It's good to see everybody. Thanks for braving the snow. Like Ben mentioned earlier in the presentation, Parks is working with the planning division on updating the park development plans in the West area. We figure you're all here anyway, so we might as well talk about parks too, right, while we have your attention. Less driving for you, less driving for me. I just want to go over some of the park classifications quick, just to kind of define what we're going to be talking about. There are our conservation parks, like Owen, I'm sure you're familiar with those. Community parks like Garner, Warner, Rennebaum, Rindall. They're typically greater than 20 acres, and these parks serve a broad purpose. They're mostly made to serve our entire community, as the name would suggest, so the entirety of Madison. What we're really looking at with these development plans are getting into the details with your neighborhood parks and the mini parks. So neighborhood parks are usually bigger than 5 acres, and they're really the basic unit of our park system. So they serve the recreational and social focus of your neighborhoods. And then our mini parks, you might be familiar with some of those. They're quite small. They're usually smaller than 5 acres. And we usually use them to address like limited, isolated, or unique recreational needs. Go ahead, go to the next point, please. Perfect. So what are the park development plans? What are we doing with them? What does that mean? They will act as a guide to park improvements for the next 10 to 15 years in those neighborhood and mini parks. So we're really going to be looking at what are the existing conditions in the parks right now, what's there, what are the soils like, what could we build, any recent improvements that we've done, planned improvements, things that we've put into our our planned budget for the next however many years, and then if we have any planned expansion for any of those parks.
Thanks, Sarah.
Could I ask what Walnut Grove is classified as?
I believe Walnut Grove would be.
It's on Westfield?
Sorry?
It's on Westfield?
Oh, yes, thank you. I believe that's a neighborhood park, I want to say.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, Sarah. Also under green and resilient, we'll also be looking at the watershed studies that the city is currently working on. So since the 2018 floods, city engineering has proactively worked on watershed studies across the city to identify flood risk and also provide recommendations on what improvements could be made to the stormwater management system to make it more resilient so they can endure some of the extreme rain events that the city is experiencing. So we'll be referencing those watershed studies as we work on this planning process. So where we are in this planning process, we are just getting started, and this is one of our kickoff meetings. In this phase of the planning process, we are working on defining the issues, opportunities, and priorities in this area. Through the spring, summer, and fall of this year, we'll work on identifying some initial concepts and implementation recommendations. And then in the winter and earlier next year, we'll put those in a plan document and finalize our draft plan and go through the various city committees and commissions to review those and get their recommendation, and ultimately go to the Common Council for their consideration of adoption of this plan. Also, as Ben mentioned earlier, that as part of this planning process, we are hoping to hire some community partners to help us assist with the engagement process to reach to some of the diverse, hard-to-reach members of the community who are often unable to attend public meetings like this. So we have applications open for that right now, and those applications are due March 20. So how can you stay engaged in this process? We have a screenshot of our project website here. So if you haven't already done so, we encourage you to sign up on our email list so you're getting the most recent updates on the planning process and upcoming meetings. We also have an interactive commenting map on our project website. If you have any specific location-based comments, you can drop in those comments in that commenting map. There's also a community survey up on our project website to get your feedback, and then there are other resources on the project website like meeting recordings, presentation slides, contact information of our project staff. And here's a QR code that will direct you to our project website and also the link to that.
For some reason, it looks like the link got overlapped with the QR code. It's cityofmadison.com/westplan if that's something that you're interested in checking out.
So that concludes our presentation, and as Ben mentioned before, we'll take some general questions and then break out into a couple of discussion groups. Thank you.
So are there any general questions on the dictionary's worth of information that we've just thrown at you as far as area plans and what we'll be covering? Not seeing any off the, yes?
Since you're interested in increasing the number of people that can live along the bus route, the BRT, do you see it developing as East Washington has?
I mean, it really depends on the context, I would say, of the potential area, that we're talking about. I think just looking at the recently adopted Odan area plan, for example, that covers kind of points south of Mineral Point Road. That would allow taller buildings, 8+ stories in some instances, but I don't think that's going to be the case really along the entire BRT line. But that will be something that will kind of be examined in a little bit more depth through this planning process, is what the appropriate redevelopment context is for these transportation corridors.
Has the BRT stop on Mineral Point in this area been identified as to location?
Yeah, there are a few stops on Mineral Point. I don't know if I can rattle them off by memory. I think there's one at High Point, one at Grand Canyon, one at Island, and then one close to Whitney Way.
And one at Westfield.
Westfield sounds right as well.
So those locations actually.
No, they're not on this map. This does show the line, one of the red lines is BRT. Maybe as before, well, actually we don't have it connected, but that's something that can be examined through the city website. I think Colin might have an answer also.
Yeah, so east to west, the stops are at Whitney, Rosa, Island, Grand Canyon, Westfield, High Point, and then the turnaround is at Junction.
Thanks, Alan. Any other follow-ups with the transportation?
Well, I just thought it would be interesting to find out where the lots are picked out for those. Are they in the West Town Mall? Are they at Whitney Way? Are they on a corner at Whitney Way?
Yeah, no,
Westfield?
that's a good question. We'll actually be having median stations for BRT. So those will be in the median of Mineral Point Road. And so that means that one station serves both directions. So that's how they're going to be located. And then the bus lane will be moved from the curb, the outside curb, to the interior, so that will be still a dedicated bus lane, but just along the median.
That's the length of Mineral Point Route.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other general questions over there?
In the comprehensive plan, it was also talked about having a range of housing types and a range of home or ownership, but yet you seem to be promoting affordable housing, high density. The city is putting, what, is 11.4 million to help afford renters for affordable housing, but yet only 4 million something to help homeowners. I guess I'm wondering why that, it seems to be contrary to the comprehensive plan.
Well, I mean, I would say it's really just a matter of funding availability primarily. The city, the state, really up to the federal government, are able to provide more affordable units if they're part of multifamily apartment complexes for less money. And so since there's such a heavy shortage of affordable housing, that's really been the focus of city efforts to try to, I wouldn't even say catch up with demand, but just do what we can to really try to meet the demand that's there for affordable housing. It's really down to that, providing as many units as we can. That oftentimes means with multifamily housing.
So those are federal funds then?
Well, it usually ends up being a mixture of funds. The city has over $10 million that is as part of the city budget that's dedicated towards affordable housing. But in practice, that goes towards projects that secure tax credits at the state and federal level. So it's kind of additive onto those projects. It makes those projects more likely to get tax credits if they also get city funding. So, one like 80-unit apartment development might cost a developer $18 million to develop. And so if we have $10 million for the city, we're going to need more than that to develop a significant amount of affordable housing, which is why we kind of work in tandem with those tax credit programs to provide affordable housing. Yes, one more question.
Is this plan being developed in close cooperation with Madison's other stated goals of reduction of CO2 production? As an example, maybe too specific, the watershed projects and removal of existing trees. It seems to be somewhat disjunct from some of Madison's other goals. Could you address any of that?
I mean, sustainability is certainly part of all of our planning processes. And I think when it comes to the watershed studies, there sometimes is a balance that has to be struck in terms of managing the pretty substantial amount of stormwater that ends up running off, and some of the pollutants and sediment that accompanies that, and trying to intercept that before it gets into the lakes. So I think there is some balance that needs to occur between managing that stormwater and still having a tree canopy that provides shade and is part of the recreation and trail system that we have in the city. And I know that some people will come down more in favor of maintaining the tree canopy, and there are some people that are very concerned with stormwater management. So that's kind of the tension maybe sometimes, and the balance that we have to try to strike for some of these planning efforts.
But do these plans get integrated into Madison's sustainability goals at some point directly?
I mean, we work within some of those sustainability goals as we examine the goals and actions that are integrated into these plans. So I think we certainly try to stay consistent through our planning processes with, as I mentioned, all the other city plans that are in place, including the sustainability plan. So we think that these really will try to work hand in hand with those other planning efforts. Any other kind of overarching questions? Maybe take one more from, you.
What kind of traffic study has been taken regarding places like O'Dana Road? Right now, it's very, very hard to get on and off for all the errands to do. It's a real traffic hazard sometimes, and now I'm hearing that there's a potential of lots more high rises going up, how are we getting on and off of Odana in our cars?
I mean, each individual like apartment development doesn't necessarily have to do a traffic analysis. Sometimes they're done for much larger redevelopment projects, like I think there was one done for Madison Yards, kind of a DOT redevelopment. The Metropolitan Planning Organization, MPO, does kind of region-wide traffic analyses. As far as the Odana Road corridor, we certainly are working with the MPO. We're not necessarily going to be doing a traffic analysis that ties directly into Odana. As far as getting onto and off of Odana in your car, I think really just trying to work with signalized intersections to the extent possible. If you're making a left turn, sometimes becomes necessary, especially in peak hours. I think to some extent sometimes that center lane can sometimes help folks as well, as opposed to the 2 lanes in each direction that had been in place. But then again, some folks aren't super comfortable with that arrangement either. So I don't necessarily have a off the top of my head solution that I think would maybe satisfy all of those concerns.
I just want to add one other thing, that the city has recently adopted transportation demand management ordinance, and so all new developments over a certain size are required to provide a transportation demand management plan where they are showing how they are minimizing the addition of single occupancy vehicle traffic to the area. So that's encouraging other uses of other transportation modes. So we are working on finding other ways to limit the number of new vehicles on the road for new developments.
Thanks, Alan. That's a good point. So I think we have about 35 minutes left, and we can certainly answer some more questions as we break into groups, but I think maybe given the number of people, two groups would be good to just kind of break into some discussion questions that we have. So maybe if there are a couple people from this left, my left,